Good morning. It's a great honor to be here with Checkmk, the annual Checkmk Conference. My name is Babak Falsafi. I'm a professor of computer science at EPFL. EPFL is the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne. And I'm also the founding president of the Swiss Data Center Efficiency Association. And the title of the talk today is Energy Efficiency in Data Centers. Why not measure it instead of guessing it? So I guess we already did the quick intros. I'm also the founding director of EcoCloud, which is a research center at EPFL. We've been looking at designing data centers for the past 14 years that are sustainable. And I also work in the AI domain a little bit in Code Depot. So I think I hit that delay. So why data centers? So data centers are a pillar for digitalization. We're moving basically everything to do digital global IT services. And these pillars are growing at a phenomenal rate. So if you look at a number of forecasts that are out there, just a 3x growth in the data center market in 10 years. There are also forecasts by Technavio, there are forecasts by Schneider, looking at the power consumption of data centers, which are also growing commensurately. And that's the topic of the talk today is, what can we do with this power consumption? How do you, as IT monitors, come into this picture? Now, data centers come in a variety of formats. The big ones are pretty big. So, there is one that's 0.5 gigawatt in Virginia, and they're growing. These hyperscalers are building larger and larger ones. They're enterprise clouds. Companies also maintain their own infrastructure. They used to maintain them sometimes on premises. Now they're moving them to co-locators in Europe. Europe is mostly a co-location market. That means that the companies that built the buildings are different from the companies that are hosting the IT, and that's a market that seems to fit well within the European business ecosystem. Having also data protection and privacy frameworks allows you to have your IT closer to the user, so edge clouds are emerging. The hyperscalers are also coming to build edge clouds in Europe. And so there is a variety of data centers in terms of form and cloud factors that are available today in the market, and these are growing at a phenomenal speed. Now, one thing that everybody talks about is AI. I don't know, you've probably heard a lot about AI. I guess in Germany we call it KI. The growth of AI is 6x per year, according to some studies, as of looking back at 10 years ago. So in 10 years, we've had 6x growth in computational demand of AI. And of course, edge clouds are also helping that in the sense that connectivity allows you to have faster decision-making, and that faster decision-making comes with AI that's closer to the user, closer to the source of data. The one thing that people may be talking about, for those of you who are more technically savvy, you've probably heard about Moore's Law, and that's where I come in. That's my expertise, Moore's Law, because I design servers in the lab. Moore's Law is a phenomenon that explains doubling of the density of silicon, and this doubling has happened for 50 years, roughly speaking. And this gives you almost computing and storage in memory for free for 50 years. Now, all exponentials eventually come to a halt, and this one is slowing down, so we're getting to the limits of physics of silicon. And so basically what that means is that if we want a bigger sort of address the bigger computational demand, for example, AI, but in general the cloud, we need to also build more. So without more, we'll have to build more. This graph here shows a super interesting recent trend. Thermal design power of cloud chips, which are your CPUs, have mostly been constant, or about 100, 150 watts for about 10, 15 years. I'm not showing numbers before 2008. If you look at a inflection point around 2019, even CPUs are going up in power consumption to 200, 300, 400, and it just keeps going. This is the beginning of the end of Moore's Law, okay? And so this is something we really need to pay attention to. Now, the metric of choice in data centers has been PUE, power usage effectiveness, and PUE basically only measures how much electricity you're delivering to your housing infrastructure, to the cooling, to the UPS systems, electricity to the building, but it doesn't take into account what's happening in the IT. And so, what is wrong with PUE? Well, PUE doesn't tell you how effective your IT is using its electricity. It doesn't give you an end-to-end energy flow in your data center because it doesn't take into account heat recycling, which is quite popular in Europe today, and also on-premise renewables. And it doesn't measure the carbon footprint of the electricity that's coming in. So here's just a quick cartoon. 20 years ago, if PUE was 2.0, that 2.0 meant half of your electricity was going into the building itself and not your IT. Today, if your PUE is 1.2, most of your electricity is going to IT. So the question is, how well are you using that electricity? And that's why we're here today. Okay, so what is full stack efficiency in a data center? Of course, you need to keep an eye on what's happening with your data center energy flow, but more importantly, you need to have an idea as to what's happening in the IT stack. And that IT stack is your compute, including AI, storage, and network. And also be able to measure and properly estimate what your emissions are from that electricity. So who we are, we're a consortium of academic and industrial partners. We're founded a couple of years ago. Our partners are basically nonprofits in Switzerland. Ourselves, we're also a nonprofit. HPE was one of the leading actors in this space, and we also work with academics at EPFL and also in Luzern. We have premium sponsors, Schneider Electric and SIGPA, a digital transformation company in Switzerland, and also the Federal Office of Energy in Switzerland. So here's just a quick flowchart of what we do. We take your measurements from the DC, and we bring that into a quantitative index, similar to PUE, but we take into account end-to-end energy flow, heat recycling, on-premise renewables. We create a similar index for IT on the same scale, and you can just look at these indices separately in our platform, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, or you can combine them to get one final index for both the IT and DC together. And with proper presentation of sources of emissions through certificates from the utility provider and proper information about your emissions for source of electricity, you can then also get a premium index, including emissions. On that note, I'll pass the baton to Martin.
Okay. When Babak first, when we talked together, first Babak and myself, Babak came to me with a challenge. Most of the people he talks to, they actually struggle to get the IT efficiency data out of their infrastructure, to know what is actually the CPU utilization across the entire data center, or memory consumption, or also file systems, or basically directly text storage. Yeah? And one of the members of SDA is actually a Checkmk user. And said, take a look at Checkmk because they have all the data. And we actually have all the data, and we have one feature which allows to calculate everything. And who of you knows the feature metrics history? Well, it's quite a lot. Yeah. We built it actually, I think, for a Swiss company as well. And actually, a lot of us also didn't know because it somehow just made it into the product. And it's actually quite a nice thing because it allows you to do this. Here you can, for example, see that you can calculate CPU utilization over a time period. For example, the average over the last 365 days, or any time period if you want. Same for memory. And all of these things are automatically there in Checkmk. And what we built into Checkmk, and we did it already actually in 2.2, there are some off-the-shelf views inside, and they basically calculate the key metrics for CPU, for memory, and for file systems, for several IT infrastructure components, yeah, which are really relevant for that matter, yeah. And that's virtualization nodes and bare metal servers. And we built calculation directly in for Nutanix. That's why it was also so important that we get the Nutanix monitoring properly in Checkmk 2.3, so that we can do that also, do the calculation for that. We have that, of course, for vSphere, and we have it for Linux and Windows, so that for anything like if you use, for example, Proxmox or Hyper-V, where you might have Linux or Windows nodes below it for the virtualization, that you can do these calculations. And it's quite easy extensible because it's a built-in feature of Checkmk. So if you have a different use case, you can just extend it. I think it's just important that this computation is heavy. Yeah? So don't expect that you push thousands of servers into it and let the calculation happen in seconds. That's not what it can do. But that's also not what it's supposed to do, because if you look into the average data center, the number of nodes for virtualization is not in the thousands. I mean, there are, of course, larger data centers where you might have that, but the most data centers where we looked into, where we talked with users, it's actually then in the hundreds at the maximum. And there, for that range, it works actually quite well. Once you have that, we also have on our website a data center efficiency calculator, because you might have a lot of different sources and you might want to put that all together. And you can then just upload the files there and you will get the final number, which will tell you what is a weighted efficiency, because obviously a server that has a lot of cores, which is highly utilized, makes more impact than one which just has 2 cores and is not utilized at all. And that's what this tool does. And so how do you actually get certified for IT efficiency? The first thing is you have to do the data collection. That's something which comes directly in Checkmk. You can use the export as CSV function, for example. Then optionally you can do some data cleanup if you, for example, say, hey, some of the things really do not matter, for example. They are just basically test systems for the time being, and you didn't want to filter them out in Checkmk, which you could do, but sometimes just deleting lines in a CSV file is easier. You can do some cleanup, and then you can put them into the efficiency calculation, which returns under that link the actual number for your data center, because then you can merge, for example, your Nutanix, your vSphere, your bare metal infrastructures together and get the file number. And then with that information, you can go to the SDEA, to the navigator and label, and with that I hand over back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Martin. That's perfect. So the Navigator is a platform that allows users to calculate the indices that I talked about, and this index is on the PUE scale. So PUE, we have a PUE Plus index, which includes heat recycling, includes on-premises sources of electricity. The more important part of the platform is IT. We have an index for IT together with Checkmk, and if you go and enter the information, you can also get an index for your IT, and we also have a calculator for emissions of sources of electricity. We're launching this month. If you go to info@sda.ch, you also get a free dashboard once we release it, and so you could play with it. It's a great play. Now, the label is based on the index, so if you decide that you also want to get the label is unique because we're the only player today, at least in the IT market. There are a lot of DC labels out there. It's timely because the sources of electricity that we're basically feeding our data centers, most of those electricity is going now to the IT stack. And that's what people don't really think about in DC gatherings. It's comprehensive. Our DC flow is also complementary with other labels that are in the market. We have a partnership with TÜV Süd that has certification for EN 50600 for ISO. We're complementary to those labels, so we can also certify the IT with those labels. We also provide Checkmk customers a certification fee waiver. So that means that you don't have to worry about the application registration fee and certification fee. We give a label fee of 30% discount to Checkmk. On that note, any questions?
So now we have a lot of questions for this talk. Yeah. Can someone just archive all of them, or I don't know. If there are any questions, you can also just raise your hands if you want to know, until someone has basically cleaned up that, because typically I do that, but my laptop is there. Otherwise, if you have questions, both Babak and me are here in the next break, and just talk to us. I think that's something where we all have some kind of obligation towards working to, and looking at the IT stack is something which can maybe let us think about, is there maybe a better way how we can split our infrastructure, how we can design our infrastructure.
And with the index and our platform together with Checkmk, you can also reduce potentially your resource provisioning for the same output that you're targeting. And that's what really this index is trying to help with.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martin. Yeah.